Hello, my name is Rachel and I'm here today to talk about one of my favourite books of all time that I've recently reread and was just fantastic, and that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. So I've been hoping to read all of Jane Austen's works this year, and I've read quite a bit of her juvenilia, and then so far I've read Northanger, Abbey and Sense and Sensibility, and now I've read Pride and Prejudice. So I've been reading them in the order that she wrote them. So this is the third one. Kind of, although this was called First Impressions before, and it's kind of may have been written before Sensibility. It's like a bit of an awkward one. But it was the second one to be published, as Northanger Abbey wasn't published till after she died. So yes, this is the next one that I was reading. So yes, this was published in 1813, and this is my second reading. So it's the first time I've ever reread Pride and Prejudice. I read it first when I was maybe around 15 or 16. I did read it pretty soon after reading Wuthering Heights, and Wuthering Heights was one of the big like classics, the first one that I ever read, and this was pretty soon after it. Definitely really enjoyed rereading it, and I'm glad that I did, because I got a hell of a lot more from it than I did the first time. I think I remember the first time reading it, but I've watched the film and definitely the TV adaptation so many times that they've kind of become more like the story to me rather than this. So I definitely noticed a few things in here that weren't in the TV adaptation, which is the thing that I like kind of remember the most. So it was really nice to read this, and yeah, I'm just gonna talk about my thoughts on this today. I'm gonna put it down though, because that's gonna be annoying to hold the whole time. So Pride and Prejudice follows a girl called Elizabeth Bennet. She has 4 sisters, and we start by being introduced to her and her family, her mum and dad, and their situation, which is that they are 5 sisters, and because there's no son, and this is during the Regency period, they don't have any security. If their dad dies, then they will be turned out of house and home because they won't inherit the house. Their cousin will inherit it. So they need to marry. It is very clear from the offset they need to marry. Even the first line talks about rich men in want of wives, because becoming a wife is essential to the plot of Pride and Prejudice. And basically where we open up, a young eligible man has moved to the area. He is called Mr. Bingley. He has brought a few people, mainly his sister and Mr. Darcy. And Mr. Darcy is also an eligible bachelor, but he is not very likeable for many people for most of the book. So yeah, that is the basic plot. I mean, most people know what happens in Pride and Prejudice anyway, but yeah, I don't want to ruin it for anyone who doesn't. So that's all I'm going to say on that. So this reread was really wonderful. I read the book in like 3 or 4 days. Like I read it so fast, I just was like, oh my god, I just need to read. I was loving it so much. And it was just everything. It's the way that, like, with Jane Austen books, it's kind of overwritten. I feel like if Austen went to a publisher now and said, like, gave them this book, they would red pen a lot of it and say, this is overwritten, you can condense this like 20-word sentence into 10 words easily. But one of the nice things in her novels is that she does overwrite. You can like luxuriate in it because it's so nice, like her descriptions and the dialogue. Oh my god, the dialogue is so funny. The dialogue is my favourite thing in Pride and Prejudice, 100%. The characters, it's one of those books where you aren't paying attention to every word, as in like, oh, I need to remember that might be important later, or blah, 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 blah. You just kind of read it and just enjoy being part of that world and getting to know the people in it more, which I really enjoy. I think you don't get that as much in books now, because everything you're writing should be in service of the ending, the climax, the whatever. It's the one nice of Jane Austen books that it's kind of just leisurely written, and it's just nice to like just be in that, which I really enjoyed on this reread. Now obviously in Pride and Prejudice our main character is Lizzie Bennet, and I really loved Lizzie Bennet on this read. Like, I think before I've always liked her and I've always thought she's quite a fierce character, and I've always enjoyed that, but I think I didn't really think about the magnitude of the decisions that she was making. So for instance, with turning down Mr. Collins, when I read that originally, I was more like, yes, she turned him down because she wants to find someone she loves, she doesn't want to settle, that's amazing, and blah blah blah. I would think things like that, whereas on this reread I was thinking like, that is such a big decision to make for like this Regency period, and for her family that we now know like they need this security, and he is the one that would inherit the house, and that would give them the security that they needed. And I think the magnitude of that decision really hit me with this reading, and it kind of made me think, like, was it the right decision? I mean, obviously it was, now we know later, but in terms of like at that moment, like, a lot of people wouldn't have made that decision, and that was a strong decision for her to make, but I don't know if it was necessarily a good one, and it might be more a flaw in her character that she said no, because in terms of that time then and what he offered, it was a good match for her. So I found that fascinating to read about. Like, I just had this total different like reaction to it this time, which surprised me. Like I mentioned before, I definitely know a lot about the TV adaptation. I've watched the TV adaptation so many times. Me and my mum used to watch it quite a lot, and so I know that one really well. And so some of the things from that came into my perception and my memory of Pride and Prejudice. So for instance, with her mother and the way her mum would say embarrassing things in the book, Lizzie really is like cringing into herself. She's so embarrassed. Whereas in the TV adaptation, I feel like she does get a bit embarrassed, but there's also this kind of, yeah, but they're my family and I'm annoyed that you're insulting them. And it's less of that in the book. There's definitely, Darcy insults her family a lot, and she kind of just like lets it go a lot of the time, and is like, yeah, he's right, like that was embarrassing, blah blah blah, and I didn't remember that. I also found it quite interesting because I've always enjoyed Mr. Bennet as a character. I've always remembered him as just being really funny, winding up like he winds up his wife like my dad winds up my mum, and I find that quite comforting. But there's moments in this book where everything could have been avoided with Lydia and Wickham, and Lizzie goes to her dad and says, you know, this doesn't seem like the right thing. I don't think she should be visiting officers or wherever she's going. And the dad's just like, yeah, just let them do what they do. Like, no one's nagging me. If they're gone, that's great. And the whole situation happens because he isn't firm with his daughters, and I saw more of his flaws with this reread that I hadn't really picked up on as much before. I think before it was more like, this is a horrible thing that happened to them, but now when I think of it, it's very like, this is a horrible thing that happened to them, but it happened to them because they weren't responsible enough. And Lizzie did try to be responsible, and her mum and dad just pushed her away and was like, no, she's going. And I find that quite weird. Like, I just hadn't picked up on that as much before. And then the last thing, I have like my thoughts on characters and stuff after, but the other thing that I didn't pick up on was Darcy saying that he didn't think Jane liked Bingley. I think I've always just been of the opinion that it's like, oh, well, she's below him, so he's not marrying her. And then with this, I definitely noticed a lot more that he's like, no, like, I looked at Bingley and how much he loved your sister, and then I looked at Jane and I didn't see the same love in her face. And so I was like, no, my friend's not going there. And yeah, that's not really portrayed that much in the other stuff. That kind of alleviates some of Darcy's guilt, in my opinion, because I've always thought of it as just a class thing, and actually, like, he did, I mean, I don't doubt that the class is a massive part of it, but also, like, it's to do with him being happy as well. He wants his friend to be happy, and I really enjoy with Darcy that he really looks after the people that are closest to him and that he cares about. And even when he starts to care about Lizzie, every time Mrs. Bingley brings up her eyes, he will not insult her, he will not like go against, like, it would be so easy for him to be like, yeah, they are annoying, aren't they? But he's just like, no, I'm gonna stick by her even though it's so embarrassing because you keep mocking me for saying that I liked her eyes, but I'm gonna still like say that I like her. And I really like that he like stood by that the whole time. And I find that he just does that with everyone. He does it with Bingley, he does it with his sister, like, he's just very loving towards people, and that was a really nice addition to the character for me because I hadn't remembered that. My other thoughts were, I liked the slowness that Darcy and Lizzie have before they are together. I like this, it kind of just chugs along really slowly in the background, and I like that. I like that he doesn't like her straight away, that he says like he doesn't want to dance with her, and the more he gets to know her, the more he starts to have these feelings for her and he wants to ask her. I feel with a lot of these books, they suddenly fall in love. You know, I've just read Sensibility, and the minute Colonel Brandon sees Marianne, he's like, I love her. And the minute, I can't remember what he's called, Edward something, sees Eleanor, he's like, I love her, I want her. And it's you know, it's always, they love them straight away, and then afterwards you have the things in the way. Like, Edward loves Eleanor straight away and they're courting basically, but then there's this other thing that's in the way. And I liked that with this, he doesn't like her, and it takes time, and he gets to know, and he gets to know her personality, and then he becomes infatuated with her because it's her, it's not just the way that she looks. And I thought that was a really good message. I think that's why Pride and Prejudice is probably remembered so much over some of Jane Austen's other novels, like in terms of the ones that I've read, because it's not instantaneous, the attraction between them. I also found that I didn't like Bingley so much with this reread, which was a surprise. I've never disliked him before. I don't think I overtly liked him, but I was very much like, oh, he's very sweet, and like, Jane deserves someone sweet, that's nice. But on this read, I was kind of just like reading it thinking, you're pathetic. Like, there's no fight in him. He doesn't have any conviction. Like, he likes Jane, and he is so easily persuaded to leave. Like, it takes no time at all for them to persuade him to leave, to persuade him not to ask her to marry him. That seems really strange to me. Like, if he loved her so much, then why wouldn't he fight for her? So I didn't like Bingley so much on this reread. I mean, I guess it is because he's so nice and he's supposed to be so agreeable that, yeah, that's like his downfall. He's too agreeable, he won't disagree. But I found it annoying. I found it took away from it for me, because I was like, it just means you don't love enough. But it doesn't mean that I don't think he's a good character. I still think he's a good character, and that's not a negative of the book or the character construction. I think it's great character construction. I just mean him as a person I didn't like as much, if that makes sense. Like, I think he's a well-written character, and I'm glad that I didn't like him. Just like, I'm not insulting Jane Austen's writing, I'm not insulting Pride and Prejudice. I can't do that. And the last thing is that I just wanted to discuss, so because I've read Northanger Abbey and I've read Sensibility so far, I wanted to discuss Pride and Prejudice in terms of those two books, because this is definitely, everything clicks with this book. The other books have their faults and there's issues with them, and Pride and Prejudice, I find it hard to find even a criticism of it as a book. Like, I really, really enjoy it, and I feel like everything with her writing and the way she develops characters and her plots and everything just comes together. I find that quite interesting. Like, with Northanger Abbey, I think it's too simple. There's not enough going on in that story. With Sense and Sensibility, I think there's kind of a lot going on, but I don't think it's carried through as much. I don't think there's as much push with like subplots and stuff, and I don't think there's as much commitment to like making a character good or bad or grey, like in a grey area. So for instance, the subplot in Sense and Sensibility with Willoughby and Marianne is good, but I don't think it's incorporated into the entire story so much. Like, it doesn't really affect Eleanor and Edward's story. It just is a story that's happening at the side, and there isn't this like commitment to making him villainous or to making him redeemable, in my opinion. Like, I talked about that more in my review bit, but yeah, like, I find that difficult. Whereas with Pride and Prejudice, I feel like there is the commitment to, with Wickham, making him villainous and also giving a bit of reason towards why he acts the way he acts. And the thing that I love is how intertwined those plots are together, because you have this main plot with Darcy and Lizzie, and you have this subplot with Lydia and Wickham, but they are so tied together that without that plot, Lizzie would never marry Darcy, because she wouldn't know the truth behind him. She wouldn't know what Wickham did, and he wouldn't have saved her sister from Wickham and made them marry, and all of that stuff definitely develops her feelings towards him. And the way that that all twines together is just masterful. Like, there's a reason this book is remembered so well, and I definitely think there's just this severe difference between those books. And with Northanger Abbey and Sense and Sensibility, like, I gave them both 4 stars and I really enjoyed them as books. There's not that click. And with Pride and Prejudice, you read Pride and Prejudice and it's this like, it's like she became Jane Austen at that point, like the Jane Austen that we remember as a writer and a skilled writer. And yeah, I really enjoy Pride and Prejudice. And I just think it's definitely her best novel that I've read so far. I'm quite interested to see how it carries on from there. My next one's Mansfield Park, which I've said before, like, I'm a bit worried about because I don't know if I'm gonna like it. But on reading Pride and Prejudice, I'm much more excited to read it because I'm thinking more, and maybe I will enjoy this because her writing definitely has jumped from Northanger and Sense and Sensibility. So it might be that it's, you know, more on the Pride and Prejudice side. It might be that I enjoy it a lot more and think of it as a more like accomplished work, as in the way that it's written and constructed. So I'm definitely really, really excited to read Mansfield Park now, and I wasn't before, so I'm happy about that. So yeah, that was my review of Pride and Prejudice. It was very chatty and all over the place, but that's also what my head is like, so that's what happens. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!